Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here with One Piece chapter 984. This is the One Piece segment, most likely as a part of the Shonen Jump roundup. Thank you for being here. So it's been a while since we talked about One Piece, a few weeks. Let's just talk about One Piece. So with chapter 984, one of the things that is interesting to talk about is really the fan reaction. Just people, they have a lot of things to say. One of the nice ones in terms of the fan reactions, chapter 984, is the whole business with Yamato being a woman. People have enjoyed that. A lot of people making a lot of funny jokes. One thing though that people are saying is that it shows that Kaido might be respectful of his son, because he refers to Yamato as a son. Might be respectful of Yamato's wishes, and I think that's a little bit hasty. I mean, it's a nice note, but what's not saying that Kaido is just one of those characters who always wanted a son and so treats his daughter as if it were a son just from the get-go. There's nothing really stopping Kaido from doing that. The reason that I'm being careful with the idea that Kaido is like this all-accepting father kind of thing, there are like little hints that show that Kaido might be a little bit more reasonable than we give him credit for. He definitely has a certain way he likes doing things, but the reason I want to be careful with it is because with the Yonko, especially with it's mostly with Big Mom. Big Mom she comes off with this giant utopia idea of like sitting all around a dinner table with all the races of the world. But Big Mom, even though she has that as a dream, she doesn't fully understand what sitting at a table with everyone else means. And we see that in Pudding's existence. Pudding gets told she's ugly. She gets shunned by her mother. That's not someone that accepts. All that Big Mom really did was move the target of racism. She pretty much brought in all the common races, and then anyone that was abnormal to that, well, they got made fun of in a lot of ways. Big Mom's I'll leave that for another time, but you get the point. Point is, even with these characters, you have to be careful, because what could seem like a good idea or something noble could very quickly turn sour once you fully see what the character is about. Still, it was a really cool plot reveal. So Yamato being a girl, biologically, like, super cool plot reveal. It is interesting that she is such an Odin fanboy. But to be fair, a lot of people are Odin fanboys, so I'm not really surprised. The love for Odin transcends all kinds of logic. Now, in terms of other fan talk, it's also the One Piece fans are upset, or some of them, not all of them, of course. Some of them are upset that the Flying Six are doing so well against Luffy. Like in this chapter, you had page 1 saying, "Oh yeah, like I kind of loosened my jaw," and it's like, come on, guys. We've been with One Piece for years, and we've been in the New World for more than 5 years. I think I don't remember when the New World started, but we've been in the New World for so long. We've seen the style that Oda's doing. When you're fighting people in the Yonko crew, if you're just having a skirmish, chances are you're not going to be beating them. And especially with Luffy, there's no reason to think that he's not going to be able, or he's not going to have trouble with people who are essentially his contemporaries. Like the Flying Six, as we saw, they're all captains in the New World, right? We're getting to the point where these people are going to be reasonable in fights. Now, Yamato does say that Luffy isn't going all out in the chapter, so that's also worth considering. But we shouldn't be expecting Luffy to just beat people down in a regular skirmish. Like, if anything, Luffy's been hitting walls all throughout his New World journey. Well, I guess after Punk Hazard, he's been hitting walls. And Luffy still having trouble only makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, if it wasn't for people helping Luffy out during Doflamingo's fight, Luffy would have lost. If it wasn't for Katakuri wanting to challenge Luffy on a more even playing field, Luffy might have lost. Luffy is sincerely still having struggles, and he's still hitting walls, and it's not that unreasonable to expect people who are so far up in a Yonko's crew to be able to still give him a challenge or to be able to tank a hit from him. If Luffy can tank hits from people he has no business tanking hits from, then other people can do that from Luffy. That just makes sense to me. I know that the power scaling gets out of control, but we just have to remember at some point, Oda doesn't care about the power scaling. Like, he only makes the hits matter when they matter. If he wants something exciting, he'll put it in there. But we really should just be going along with the story at this. I think One Piece lost its hardcore battle logic a long time ago, specifically after Marineford, because I think at Marineford, well, Oda's already said it. He wants to replicate Marineford. When you look at Dressrosa, he's trying to replicate the chaos of Marineford. Any hoosers, the chapter had other little things that I thought were really interesting, that I really enjoyed. You know, seeing all the samurais hiding inside of, or they all got in properly. I really like that, seeing how they're all laughing and cohorting, and just, you know, on the inside, they're just concerned about Momonosuke, who's about to be killed. I especially loved seeing Robin and Jinbei together, and them having that little, like, quick talk between each other. I love that. It's just so cool to see them actually standing together. It's so neat. So I really love that. I did find it funny that in a world of devil fruits, people are asking, is it even possible to time travel? When it's like, guys, you have a bunch of mutants among you. Like, your boss is a dragon. Like, come on. There's a lot of weird powers in One Piece. Like, why are you all being so ignorant? You're in the new world. It's just kind of stupid, honestly. It's anyway, on Law's side, we have a lot of cool stuff going on with Law going out with Beppo and them. So I think it's gonna be neat that it seems like Law's main fighters are Beppo, Chachi, and Penguin. It's pretty cool that those are the main fighters from what it looks like. And of course, here we also get Nekomamushi coming back along with Marco and Izo. So it was really cool to see Izo. He looks super solid. Nekomamushi seems to have a gun strapped onto his arm. That's pretty neat. And it seems like Marco might be going off to deal with Perospero because he saw a shadow at sea. So overall, you know, we haven't gotten to the action. It's definitely a lot of setup. And I really enjoy it. I'm kind of sad that the next chapter isn't coming out till like the 19th. So we're skipping next week and we're going beyond that to get the next chapter. Unfortunate. Really unfortunate. Yeah, like, because next week, I'm recording this on a Tuesday. It's going to be the 14th next week. But yeah, man. At the end, Kaido also says that he wants to do the new Onigashima plan or project. I'm really curious as to what that could be. It seems like it's going to be something centered around his island, though. And honestly, when you look at Kaido's island, it really does look like an art project. So it'd be pretty neat if he's just like, yo, we're going to turn this place into a mobile warship, and then we're going to go take the world. Maybe he's going to do some Thriller Bark shenanigans, you know? But I'm actually really excited to find out what this whole new Onigashima project plan's going to be. One thing that was interesting is that we didn't see the giant lady. I forget her name, but she's one of... Is it Black Maria or something like that? I forget her name. But, you know, she's the one that was all over Kaido. It's interesting to see that she wasn't in this chapter as we moved into Kaido's scene. But anyway, at the end of the chapter, you have a lot of pieces just ready to go. And also Yamato revealing that she knew Ace and all that. I really want to see where we go from here. Well, I guess Yamato. I gotta be careful with the pronouns there. Yamato knowing Ace, though, that pretty much is going to get Yamato on Luffy's side, because Luffy's gonna hear that and be like, "Oh, Ace's friend, great, let's rock and roll." Also, it's cool to know that Yamato has Odin's Bible with her, or I guess the journal, which Yamato treats as the Bible. Anyway, exciting stuff for One Piece. I am very excited to see where we go from here. In terms of my favorite shot for the manga, it's definitely Robin and Jinbei. Definitely 100% love that. Okay, so here is Chainsaw Man chapter 76 as a part of the Shonen Jump Roundup. Okay, so this is the chapter where the Gun Devil continues wrecking stuff and Makima defends? I don't know how to call it. Anyway, the big thing that I really want to just take away from this is just, you know, props to the translator for translating all the names. But yeah, let's just go quickly through it. One thing that the chapter did that I continue to enjoy is just giving us the exact breakdown of the timing of the events. So at 3:18 with 23 seconds, Makima spots the Gun Devil at 500 kilometers. That was pretty cool. Cool that she knew where it was coming. Then at 3:18 with 24 seconds, we have the very interesting activation ability, that being that the Gun Devil can fire a bullet through the heart of every living thing born in the months of January, February, March, May, June, August, September, November, December. So not all the months there. Like, we're missing April, July, and October. I wonder what the logic is for that. Maybe it's some kind of like weird wordplay that makes sense, or like some kind of weird event. I don't know. I don't know what could possibly explain that. One thing I did think was interesting is that it's every living thing. So that includes animals as well. And it's just interesting to see the destruction that gets produced. Anyway, at 3:18 with 25 seconds, you have the Gun Devil activating its ability to go shoot Makima. And so at that point, for the next page, you have Makima's 29th recorded death. I missed that on the first read-through, but it was cool to see that that's the 29th death. I wonder who recorded it. That's really my big question. Who recorded the death? Who was there to see that? Anyway, the shot of Makima just ignoring the bullets as they come around her, as the other two are chained, it's a cool shot. Absolutely cool shot. Anyway, at 3:18:27 seconds, you have Makima activating her ability, and she uses quite a few people. So it was just interesting to see everyone that got involved there. It was interesting to see the dead people having their contracts reused, so the Punishment Devil. It was interesting to see that one antagonist getting the Snake Devil used, and it was cool to see the Spider Devil again. Honestly, like, it's a cool shot when she has those people just summoned around her. It's a really neat thing. I do wonder how it works for the people that have died before, though. Anyway, at 3:18 and 28 seconds, you have whatever that mess is. It looks really cool, and it's cool that the Gun Devil's looking up to see it. I do hope that we get to see the Gun Devil, like, talk, be intelligent. I just want to see intelligent thought come from such a giant hulking monster. I think that'd be neat. Anyway, at the end of the chapter, we're back to Denji, interestingly enough, and Pochi is pretty much telling Denji not to open that door, so I'm very curious as to who's on the other side of that door. I wonder who it could be. Is it someone that's for the Gun Devil, or is it someone on Makima's faction? That's my big question. I wonder who it is. But yeah, overall for the chapter, it's pretty cool, right? Like, the cool thing here is really just the combat between Makima, or like, the high tier combat. Like, it's really just special effects happening everywhere, but it's cool to see it. It's cool to see the Gun Devil looking so hardcore, and it's cool to see Makima fighting back with a ring made of her brains, right? It's 100% neat stuff. I like her. She's been a really cool character. But yeah, for Chainsaw Man this week, honestly, it's so irregular for like a battle chapter, but it's very neat seeing this kind of depiction of damage. Definitely 100% novelty. Okay, this is the Juju Kai segment, chapter 113. Just giving my quick thoughts on the chapter. Not going to talk too much on it. This chapter this week had Megumi versus his father. It was pretty neat. I kind of wanted to see more Sukuna stuff, because that's where the interesting stuff is right now. But it was neat. I really liked how the chapter ended off on a nice note, just with the flashback, and then him just offing himself because he's that, or Megumi's father offing himself because he's just that cool of a guy. I think that was a really neat note, just because it continues this guy's legend of just being too much, right? So the suicide was cool. And I like how it ended off with him asking for the name. You could definitely tell, right? The guy, we knew this, but he liked his kid, and you can definitely tell, like, when he kills himself, that love, that adoration is still there, to some degree. It was interesting to see who he was talking to sell off Megumi and all that. But anyway, their fight. Can't say, I followed it well enough. Like, the fights with Juju Kai recently have been pretty all over the place in terms of just all the crazy powers going on. But the only other segment that was worthwhile that wasn't the fight was the stuff going on with Shoko, just revealing that some people that got horribly injured were being healed. And it was interesting that she has a reverse curse technique to heal others. That's something that even Satoru can't do. So that was interesting to find out about. I really appreciated that detail, because I did wonder what happens to the guys that got horribly maimed. So it was neat to see that they're okay, and it's cool to see that the principal is there with them. But the battles rage on. Hopefully, with this, we'll have ended this portion with Megumi, and we can go back to Sukuna, because that'd be pretty neat. One thing I will say is that, some people feel like this whole thing with Megumi's father was just wasted. And I don't think so. I think there was a lot of value here, right? Because Megumi could do a lot with that. He could follow up on who this guy was that he was fighting. Maybe he finds out some things. And ultimately, Megumi's father helped the shamans, right? He helped them in taking down the octopus curse. I forget his name. I know he would be upset if I forgot his name, but I forget his name. But yeah, overall for Juju Kai, it was a very, in some ways, it was kind of somber towards the end. It was a very chill chapter, even though, there was like a horrible fight going on. But knowing the ending, it's just, it felt like just a weird kind of closure for this guy and his son. Mind you, Megumi does have closure here, but maybe he'll find it later. Anyway, for Juju Kai, I'm still very excited. I do want to see what's going to happen with the Sukuna stuff, though, because that's where the interesting stuff is at. Okay, this is Time Paradox Ghost Rider Chapter 8, one of the new series in Shonen Jump. As you can tell, it's only been 8 chapters. Just gonna assume that you know what Time Paradox Ghost Rider is about, and we're just gonna jump right into it. So this was a really interesting chapter. I didn't expect that the messages were going to continue so well. We got a lot of information here. I am very curious still as to what is going to be the source of death, because the guy was saying that it hasn't been eliminated. But it's really interesting. There's a few things that come out in this chapter that are rather curious. And because this is a mystery series, it's kind of hard to figure out like how to probably tackle this. The best way to do it is probably going to have to be to just go page by page. But in terms of the broad strokes, what you need to know is that the chapter pretty much just set up Teppei to be able to go forward to try and save this girl. This is another chapter that relies exclusively on Teppei having angst, or like having the author gets a lot of mileage out of having Teppei struggle over what he's supposed to do. And this chapter is another perfect example of that. Like, a lot of the drama comes from Teppei, but the good thing is that you could read this chapter and it's like, the reality is you read it, and it was compelling from beginning to end, at least in my opinion. It was compelling, so it does at least show that the writer is good at character drama when it comes to Teppei in particular. So let's go into the first page. And the cover page I want to just show you real quick, because there's some interesting things happening in the cover page. First off, our main guy, Sasaki Teppei, I think Sasaki is like one of his name, but Teppei, he has gears in his eyes. So that's really interesting. That might be a reflection, but that's an interesting detail. Not only that, when you look at the watch that's here, there's also astrological signs. So here we can see, actually, are those astrological signs? Some of them. Okay, I just brought it up because I have to make sure. So we have Libra, we have Scorpio, and I'm pretty sure we can see Aquarius at the top there. So it's interesting that the astrological signs are written into this clock. I do wonder what that might mean in the future. It might just be a little detail, but it's just interesting that astrological signs are being involved here. Anyway, on page 2 and 3, the first thing that you have is Teppei like rubbing the stuff and finding out that it's iron sand. So what that should really indicate is that the messages are working by the way of magnetism, which makes sense because you see lightning in the area. But yeah, the messages are working by the way of magnetism. Iron sand is something that people typically encounter when they're in middle school or high school doing experiments. So I think that was an interesting detail. I didn't expect the writer to address the mechanism of the messaging, but the fact that they went that far, cool stuff, appreciated it. The next big thing that we get is in response to Teppei's question of like, who are you or whatever, and like, are you the one sending me messages from the future? You get root 144, which would resolve itself to be 12. So what people are saying is that this might be some wordplay coming from the Japanese. 12 being Junie or something like that. Like, there might be a character named Junie who is sending the messages. Personally, my theory is that it's either Teppei or Aino sending the messages. So I'm not sure if I would believe another character altogether. It might be, but I'm pretty in love with my first idea, so I'm definitely biased. But one thing I do wonder is, instead of answering, like, this is a far shot, because the simplest answer is that the guy is answering the question of what his name is and saying Junie. But I'm thinking, like, the other way of reading that is saying root 144. That's the other way of reading that number. And when you say root 144, what that sounds like is like saying this is the 144th iteration of trying to save Aino's life. Or you could say it's the 12th iteration of saving Aino's life. The only reason I think about it like that is because I remember that Tokyo Ghoul had Route A, or whatever that second season was, which was pretty much an alternate route. And you can kind of see Route A, right? It's just like the Japanese have such weird, like when they want to be creative, they can get really creative. Like Kingdom Hearts is another really good example of someone getting creative with naming. For instance, 358 over 2 days. That's how you pronounce that in title. So just think about it like that, right? Like you never know. Like if they want to get tricky, they could legitimately get tricky. And I get Kingdom Hearts 5 whenever I see something cryptic like that. Because like in my opinion, just if someone's asking your name, just write it. You can clearly write quite a lot. Just write the name. Why make it such a mystery? Of course, if it's important that the name doesn't come out, it makes sense. Anyway, the next interesting thing is that the future observer knows that Itsuki is going to produce a new series. And what I have to ask to that is, how do they know that Itsuki is going to produce a new series? How do they know Anima? That implies that the future observer is able to observe the new timeline as it develops. And that's really interesting. Like, how do they have that degree of power to know what's going to happen on the current route that they're on? Very interesting thing, because there's no reason to believe that Anima would have begun in the original timeline. And so it's two options. I'm thinking it's either the person is able to see the new future that's being created, or the person just knows from trial and error from other attempts at saving the girl's life that they know that it's coming here. And in that particular idea, it would be interesting if they have a deterministic future, in the sense that no matter what they do, Aino will always die. So this might be the way that the future course corrects. So we might be seeing something like Steins Gate, where they have to like make so many deviations to just push people away from the timeline that ends in Aino's death. It's going to be very interesting. It's either the observer is observing the new future, or the observer knows the ultimate end because of multiple iterations. Now, one thing that the observer tells us is that Itsuki has to defeat Aino, and must use White Knight to do it. And it's like, what exactly does defeat even mean in the context of Shonen Jump? Does it mean unseating her from the first place position? Because in Bakuman, that was what a defeat ultimately was. The main duo had to get their manga to be the number one in the Shonen Jump rankings one time, and then they got an anime and all that kind of stuff. So when you think about it like that, like, what does defeating Aino mean? Does it mean just keep her from the number one spot in Shonen Jump? Does it mean botch or sabotage her volume sales? Does it mean get her cancelled? Because if I'm thinking about it, it clearly means get her cancelled. I mean, at that point, if this all relies on this woman writing stuff, I mean, knowing that the other alternative is death, would it be wrong to think like, I could just accidentally smash her fingers, right? Would it be wrong to think that? If you just destroy her hands, she probably isn't going to be able to work. That's just, that's being very dark. That's being very dark. But like when the alternative is death, I really have to understand exactly what do they want her defeat to be. Because saying that Teppei getting beaten is going to kill her is pretty nebulous, because Shonen Jump rankings are they're so finicky. What does a defeat even mean in the context of a Shonen Jump magazine? Is it getting cancelled? It's like that's the problem. I'm sure that there's a very specific definition for what the defeat is. It's just until we know that, it's very hard to like understand what exactly is going on here. Although right now people are saying that this might just be death due to overwork, which makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think given how Shonen Jump treats Oda, it's reasonable to expect that they would be careful with an author overworking themselves. Moving on, the next thing that we get in terms of the mystery is that we get the lottery numbers. And this is another thing that we can use to try and understand what kind of logic their universe runs on. So this one, the future observer says that these are going to be the winning lotto numbers for April 22nd. Now, what I'm curious is, again, there's two things here. One is either, well, okay, how do you start this? One, the first thing, do these numbers come true? If these numbers come true, it implies two things. That could be either or. One is that the future is fixed and that there's no butterfly effect. So if this person knew what the numbers were in the original timeline, they could say that these are going to be the same numbers for the same period of time. The butterfly effect isn't in power here. Or it could just lead to the conclusion that this person is actually looking at the current timeline. So that's what we get if the numbers are correct. If the numbers are incorrect with the lotto drawing, what it says instead is that the butterfly effect is happening and the future observer overlooked that. But honestly, I don't see a reason for why it would be incorrect. So if it is incorrect, that's going to throw an interesting wrinkle into things. But at this point, probably best to assume they're going to be correct, because one thing that you understand from all of this is that when Ghost Rider doesn't want to think about something, it's not going to dwell on it. One thing that you get from this chapter, especially when it comes to things that it's dwelling on, is that the author is doing a lot to try and justify Teppei as a worthwhile protagonist or as a virtuous protagonist. Like this same page where you have the lotto drawing stuff, you have the man saying out loud that he doesn't care about money, that all the profits were not going to himself, that he was still in debt. What it ultimately wants to say, the author is doing his best. And I think this might be, maybe the author received a lot of the comments about the guy being a plagiarist, even though I felt like he was justified in all of it. So maybe he's just doing his best to just show like this guy is deserving of being a protagonist. This guy is deserving to be the main guy. This guy legitimately doesn't have a bad bone in his body. So when you have him like saying flat out the guy doesn't use any profits from White Knight, and then you have the guy ultimately saying that he just wants to make sure that the manga doesn't disappear from the world. That to me honestly is just, again, the author trying to legitimize his protagonist. I think the guy was already legitimized from the very beginning. I already know he's a nice guy. I guess it's interesting to see how far that characterization goes. Like, it is legitimately cool to see that he wasn't using profits for himself. But at this point, it doesn't change anything that I believed about the character. From the very beginning, I thought that the character was in the clear. And from the way he behaved in the first couple of chapters, I already thought he was a virtuous guy. This only just makes him seem like a literal saint. Like, honestly, it makes him seem like a literal saint. And of course, his struggles throughout the throughout the chapter are also worthwhile. And his final motivation after seeing the smiley face that gets created on the fridge. Seeing the smiley face and how it just shook him and how that kind of changed the art as we went into the final pages was also really good. So in terms of art, awesome series. In terms of character motivation, I think it dwells a lot on Teppei, but like still really good. In terms of the mystery, I am very invested. Like in terms of what I'm thinking, just as we go into the future, the go-to thing is always murder, right? Like always have to assume it's a crime of passion. Someone kills Aino because they're jealous. Now, honestly, I don't know how making a good manga like saves that. Maybe like if he continues being the greatest mangaka in the world with White Knight, maybe Aino's killer shifts to him instead. I don't know, but my initial thoughts. There's a killer involved, and yeah, I did think that Aino and Teppei would work together to keep making White Knight good. But now knowing that she's going to be making anima, that's very interesting. But yeah, no, man, I am totally curious. I'm still hoping that one of the two is the future observer. I really hope it's not a new character. And yeah, it's a cool series. It's legitimately a cool series. I am having so much fun with it. I hope it'll stick around long enough to get its first arc done. But from what I understand, the puzzle series, they typically do last that long. I think a good example in terms of a series that survived and then went to the shitter was Enigma. There was this puzzle series in Shonen Jump a very long time ago. The first main mystery was really, really good, and it lasted for about 50 chapters. And then after that, quality, it couldn't sustain itself. But these kind of series, when a good mystery comes, it can usually last long enough to solve the main mystery. Another good one, along this vein would have been The Promised Neverland, although The Promised Neverland is an example of a series that was able to maintain itself on new legs. But yeah, around 50 chapters. I feel like in 50 chapters, the main mystery will be resolved. I'll be very surprised if we go beyond 50 with the mystery still not resolved. But hey, very excited for Time Paradox Ghost Rider. I also write a lot of comments on the Viz site for Time Paradox Ghost Rider. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, like look in the comments. I might have left like a giant paragraph or something talking about whatever was going on in there. Anyway, that was Time Paradox Ghost Rider Chapter 8. Okay, this is Trip doing the Shonen Jump roundup. I'm gonna do a rapid fire one for the series that I wasn't really feeling this week. That being Undead Unluck, Yozukura Family, and Mashle. We'll begin with Mashle. So Mashle, what's interesting about Mashle this week is that it's pretty much doing the shonen thing of doing the one-on-one fights as a group moves through a particular area. And this week we had the loud guy, who pretty much looks like Renji from Bleach. The loud guy doing his little bomb magic delay trick. Honestly, you know, like the Mashle, I'm here for the gags, and right now they're doing like a typical shonen setup. It's not a bad thing. Like, I'm all for seeing a little bit of action, but it's definitely not the place that I think Mashle really excels in. So for this week, and I also I don't really like the character that was displayed, and I don't know his name, but the explodey dude, you know, like he's not one of my favorites. It's cool to see that he's pretty impressive and all that kind of stuff, but you know, the humor comes from Mash most times, and his buddy, the Syscon. So I'm not really feeling it, not 100% here, but I hope Mashle survives long enough so that we get past this. In regards to Yozukura Family, I'm very happy that Yozukura Family is moving on. I do think Yozukura Family has a nice balance between comedy and main plot stuff. So like this chapter was a good example of the comedy and the plot stuff. What was essentially a fishing trip turned into a survive the assassins mission, which eventually turned into let's deal with actually the big enemy by taking out one of their subs or whatever. So that was wonderful. The progression throughout the chapter was nice. I really appreciated it. You know, I'm still waiting for this to turn into Katekyo Hitman Reborn, to just go like full-on supernatural battles. That'll probably happen in Chapter 80, but I do sincerely hope that Yozukura Family survives long enough to get there. I think Yozukura Family strikes a nice balance with wholesomeness and comedy and a main plot. So I definitely would like to see Yozukura Family rewarded. It's definitely got the ability to be a mid-tier Shonen Jump series, and so far, you know, I really appreciate it. I do legitimately hope it does well. In terms of just where Yozukura Family lands when it comes to the Shonen Jump table of contents, like for this upcoming week of Shonen Jump, Yozukura Family is like in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's in the top half of the table of contents. So I'm really hoping that means that Yozukura Family is getting legs. And if we look at last week's ordering, we have Yozukura Family was actually fairly deeper. So like Yozukura Family definitely fluctuates a lot. But Shokugeki no Soma did worse than this towards the tail end. And it still managed to go for a very long time. So I'm hoping that Yozukura Family will be 100 chapter series for like I'm definitely hoping for it. It's definitely got the makings to be like a 100 chapter series. Finally, Undead Unluck, they continue with their arc where they're going onto the boat. In this chapter we find out about Unrepair, and we see just how Andy feels about him. So as a chapter, I mean, I think there were like a few cool details that popped up in this. Like we learned that the powers transfer from people, like if someone dies, the power gets transferred. So that was interesting to find out, and it was just interesting how often people said that things have become easier ever since the language got unified. Really interesting stuff. But this was a lot of a battle chapter, so you know I'm not like 100% in for it. It's not like one of my favorite arcs. I do think like I enjoy it more when we're dealing with the more cosmological aspects, and so when we're dealing with other humans, it's just like, okay, well, I do like Unrepair, and that Unrepair represents a fount of knowledge, but you know, not my favorite chapter of Undead Unluck, but definitely necessary for continuing into the future of the series. Oh, you know what? We'll throw in one more rapid fire one in there, like Doctor Stone, because I don't have that much things to talk about. Doctor Stone was pretty much just showing the story of Zeno and how he got petrified and all that. It was cool to see the synchronicity between Senku and Zeno, 100%. It was cool to see that Zeno was using Senku's research on the doves and the whole thing, and I liked just showing the full story as to why Senku was working on gasoline that first chapter. And in this one, we also had something about a platinum ring or something. Let me just make sure. Was it a platinum ring? Well, Carlos ate a ring. So chances are that's going to be important. Like, why show a ring if it's not going to be important? But yeah, the whole thing with Zeno was just to show synchronicity. So, you know, good enough for a backstory. Now doing Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 chapters here because I just read Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin after getting curious about it. I didn't realize that it was Tamura's series. In other words, the Beelzebub author's series. I want to support the Beelzebub author. Beelzebub was amazing. Hungry Marie, not the best. I wasn't feeling it. But this one's definitely, like, it's everything that we love about Beelzebub, right? It's a hard-boiled guy, a kind of thug, and then we have a child. Except this time the child's a little bit more, has a bit more agency. So the first chapter, you know, makes you feel like you're probably gonna have it's gonna be a comedy, like it's just a weird gag manga. And then the second chapter is where things get really interesting, right? Because like in the second chapter, you find out there's actually legitimately a war against sea animals. Like there's a bomber who's an octopus, and then you go back to the first chapter and you're like, oh my god, when this girl was saying that there was actually turtles peeking and what the other sea creature doing shoplifting, she was actually right. It wasn't a metaphor. It's actually like this is actually a full-on war. So when you have the end bit where this guy having tentacles coming out of his mouth and the hard-boiled cop being there, shark being there to deal with this, it's like, oh my god, yes, that's amazing. That turned so quickly. Like I know, like it's a show where there is an anthropomorphic dolphin, and we're saying that it turns very quickly when we see the octopod just releasing its tentacles, but at the same time it's like, holy crap, like actually, like that turned so quickly. So I'm actually really rooting for the series. I want it to get to like the 70s at least. If it can like get to Beelzebub's level, that'll be amazing. But 100%, I'm definitely into it. I love the gags. I love the female cop. I love the little girl Chaco. Her physical humor. I love the faces. Like that's definitely one thing that the Beelzebub author has under control. It's the faces on children that just make them look like so guilty. 100% into it. Definitely with this whole thing with the ocean wars. I am 100% in. This was such a treat. The first chapter had me curious. The second chapter has me wanting to go in 100%. I am 100% into the series. I hope it continues to do super well. Doing Black Clover chapter 256. So Black Clover chapter 256 ended with Yami going a step above, going plus ultra, and dealing with Dante and chopping off a good portion of Dante. Now, honestly, I'd be very surprised if Dante dies here. I would love it if Dante goes down here, but like there's so much tomfoolery that Dante could pull off, and I'm pretty sure his name's Dante. We're gonna assume his name's Dante, but there's so much tomfoolery that the man can pull off. So he could probably revive. I really hope that this does do a significant thing to him, though. I do legitimately hope that this like weakens him a lot. But we'll have to see. I did look at the spoilers already for the next chapter, and they're like the man's. I think because they were kind of like really bad translations. Like it seems like someone's still talking, but I don't know if that's his death talk or if that's his like I'm gonna get a second wind talk. But honestly, he seems to be a big deal, so we should probably assume he's gonna be regenerated. But it was cool. It was cool to see Yami pulling off. I'm gonna surpass my limits right now. And it was cool just to see how the battle progressed. Definitely for the choreography and the special effects. It looked really impressive. But overall, this was a battle chapter of Black Clover. One thing I did find interesting was when King Boy was talking about how the mechanism works. specifically that we need to open the door so that they can get 100% of their power. And he made a special stipulation that he's not sure about what's going on with Asta. So that's really interesting. I thought the demon that they're like powered from was in the real world with them, but I guess not. But I feel like Asta's devil is definitely in the same world as them. But yeah, overall, Black Clover, it was an excellent Yami chapter. I don't think anyone can say it wasn't an excellent Yami chapter. I'm very excited to see what the next step of the battle is going to be. And finally, as a bonus, because I saw My Hero Academia Vigilantes at this time, this is My Hero Academia Vigilantes chapter 81. I'm just going to keep it really brief. I love the segment with Pop imagining what her life with Koichi could have been. That is wonderfully cute. And seeing the full progression from being Vigilantes to having a newborn child to having an older child and then slowly getting older. I absolutely love that. The ending where it seems like Pop has just bit the bullet, like, man, I really hope she lives. I really hope they get to have this happy life. I'm really rooting for them. I mean, I like Sukachi's sister a lot, but it would be nice if Pop doesn't die, right? I want Pop to live. I thought it was a great chapter, and it's just like I wish